Hi friends, uh, I'm starting part 2 of Web Application Firewall in AWS and its guidelines how to implement it to our application. So before this, if you want to watch part 1, you can watch part 1 so that you will get the what is this white paper all about. But to start with, I just want to give little overview, not taking much time, and start with it. So we are talking about WAF, Web Application Firewall, to protect our applications from different types of attack, which we discussed like DDoS attack, no, we like bad bots, having different things. So right now we might be using, if you are using any one of this service to make your application available public facing, like uh, many people use CloudFront, application load balancer, and expose your public APIs, Amazon API Gateway, AppSync, serverless. If you're using any of these service, then you should use AWS WAF, Web Application Firewall. And Web Application Firewall helps us to set different rules for our public traffic. So in last class, we have stopped in the discussion of the architecture or the requirement. So basically, if you see the requirements, what we have the requirement. So if your application is public facing, and that's the requirement to protect your application. So, and as I mentioned, OWAF top 10, like open, this is a standard which security guidelines says that you need to provide under different web vulnerabilities, attacks, and so based on this, AWS has provided this WAF and also governance of logging the request, and if something goes wrong, we should know why it went wrong, like why this application is not performing. Then we see the logs and we will get like lot of requests from one particular IP, a lot of requests from one particular no, one particular region. So these are the things we need to have governance about. So here we were started talking about this, and let's focus on this. So there is a central security team provides a document and general guidance best practice for all application teams. That's how right now in IT there will be a separate SOC team or central security team. The central security team helps using firewall or WAF policies to deploy web application based on AWS baseline rules. As I discussed before, baseline rules is something which AWS already given predefined with WAF. So when we deploy WAF to our application, it has certain rules by default to each team's account without automatic remediation. This policy is configure and deploy a copy of web ACL is not automatically accessed to application. Like for example, CloudFront or load balancer or API gateway may not have ACL. Uh, when you have your central team will provide a WAF which will be having this ACL rules and everything already configured. Like it will be copied from, they will have one master copy and they can give it. Although this approach is not force the protection of your web teams, it provides a central security team with visibility of application have WAF attached to their endpoints. This is very important for security team, information security or security team should have control of all the applications. Thing it may not be more helpful for software engineers or DevOps engineers, but yes, of course, for security engineers, it's more important. But security should start from everywhere, and we also call DevSecOps. So everyone should have security. Application teams can choose to apply the central web ACL as it is or modify it before the application. Now, since our security team provides this central access control list, we can apply that or we can modify a little bit based on our security requirement. So, if you see here from the central perspective, there is 6 applications running in CloudFront, and when we have CloudFront, so we have it is attached to different policies, policy 1, policy 2, policy 3, policy. So these are like tags they are using. Web application, ACL1, ACL2, ACL3, ACL4, ACL5, ACL6. These are the rules, conditions, and filters. So whenever your application, like your application is going to serve to your uh, uh, your customers or the public, it going to follow these filters. So now you have added filters to your application, so it will go to the rules, conditions, and filters, then the request will be served or the request will be getting. So this is called as master rules. There is something called master rules. So if you see in AWS, organization is a service which will help to manage many different AWS account. If you have 20 AWS account or 30 AWS account, this will help us to manage. And this AWS config is kind of a template where AWS config maintain all the configurations we need to store centrally. From the AWS config, if we apply this WAF firewall, so it will be easy to manage all the 6 applications from the top level, and they will have this rules applied, so we no need to apply one by one, but every application will get the configuration from AWS config and attached to it. So here if you see, backend applications are like web servers, a load balancer, DB servers, all 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 will also be monitored by WAF using either cloud formation. If you're using cloud formation or CDK, any infrastructure as a code. So WAF also, you will need to also add WAF component when you deploy into it. So this is simply to understand how we can apply WAF for many accounts in one way. But if you see the second example, so when the central team creates 2 firewall manager policies, it's not one policy which is common for everyone. We have different policies for different one. So one person is using WordPress, one person is using HTTP application, so they need an IP range. So there's a tag which can be split the policies. That is what this still from the central level you can have multiple tags like WordPress, web applications, and apply it. So the security team can monitor the WAF compliance, firewall compliance with firewall manager in AWS console. Firewall managers allow you to identify if the resources have the correct WAF ACL associated as configured by firewall policies. Integrated security hub with, so security hub basically detects kind of monitoring to detect the resources that are not properly protected by WAF rules. Excellent. Then the third example, so you have a firewall manager implementation as a one central WAF policy, then we can automatically do this. So if we are going to make this for all application teams, so one central policy using the baseline uh, will be applied to all the application team can configure application specific policies for WordPress in each account within the organization. Firewall manager creates one web access control list. Firewall manager automatically associate that config. So basically we can override the existing policy also with WAF when you apply again from the organization level. So some of the application you find they have not have all the policies, then you will reapply it from the organization service so that it get overridden and all the new policy which you applied get effective. The security team can monitor the WAF compliance through the firewall in the AWS management console. Firewall manager allows you to identify if the resources have the correct WAF web ACL associated as configured by the firewall manager policy. So this is again and again it tells that security team can manage a lot of things with AWS firewall manager. Here logging. So when we say logging, it's a real-time logging. We get logs through CloudWatch based on the rules we have, and it gets stored in S3 bucket, or if the data is high we can stream it with Kinesis data. For each request a WAF log is written. that contains the request information such as timestamp, header details, and action of the rule that match. AWS WAF does not currently log the body request. Okay, they are not using the body, but they are seeing the request itself. In the logging configuration of ACL, you can customize what we can send to the log. Log filtering is there, log register. So you don't want everything to be logged. You can see what exactly you need. You need timestamp only. Okay, you can then filter it out and have only timestamp only. So logging filtrations are field radiation is what kind of field you want. Like you want URL of the field, or no, you want just you need to have certain keywords. So those kind of things you can do. So log filtering allows unwanted logs to be stored. Anyway, we are storing all these logs in S3, and if you get everything logged, then your storage is high. So you don't need to log everything, and also some sensitive data like personal information, PII, GDPR complex. Again, we should not store name or phone number of certain people, but to ensure we are not doing it. So you can use logs to debug. Yes, we can use logs to debug forensics of security information. Even manage so interesting, like you are the forensic officers to see why from the security side why this has happened. By default, logging is not enabled when you create web ACL. So logging is not by default, but to automate logging you should use this configuration. Like again, you should use a lambda function to do this. So AWS config will get lambda, and with lambda it will, if you want to do automatic logging actions, so no, automatically you want to enable logging, then you can do this. So whenever someone deploys WAF, then from the config, the lambda will function will have the feature to go and enable it. So now implementation, select a starting point. That is very important, where you're going to start. So after you identify the requirements, you decide to start with. If you are new to WAF, AWS recommends starting with non-critical application when possible. This approach allows you to familiarize yourself with the new platform and turn your configuration while limiting the risks of and misconfiguration of your business. AWS also recommends starting with the application that you are having good understanding of the application traffic pattern. So AWS asks us to evaluate the service much with our to gain our confidence. AWS WAF integration design. So we have to know we are using CloudFront or API Gateway, which service we're going to integrate this WAF is. For all public facing application, AWS recommends to do this. If it is CloudFront, then CloudFront can be used in both static and dynamic content. By default, CloudFront itself block non-HTTP traffic and malformed HTTP requests and provide inline DDoS attack network layers 3, 4. No, CloudFront has some kind of protection. So then we need to have WAF for additional level of requirement. What is our additional level of requirement? So WAF offers the origin provided for load balancing server. Like for example, you might want to inspect responses written by origin. In that case, you can use AWS WAF to inspect incoming requests to CloudFront at the edge. So this actually CloudFront, we go to CloudFront and get data where when the application when you're getting application to request to the application. But now how the request coming to CloudFront itself we are going to monitor. So when we have some problem with application, we go to CloudFront and check now we are we are putting one more layer on top of it. So that's the key here. And another example is protecting multiple application on single domain served by CloudFront. You can use AWS WAF on CloudFront for common IP and IP geolocation based blocking at the region, at the edge, and deploy additional WAF capability. So basically, CloudFront does a lot of things which we need to do, but we should not duplicate that. We should have a strong understanding, and we should see the benefit with WAF. That's what they are trying to do. give scenarios. So if you have multiple application with same domain name like google.com, google. So then people call google.com from every part of the world, right? So that if you want to block only from one part of the country or one part of the region, then we can able to before it hits CloudFront and CloudFront blocks it, WAF does it for CloudFront. So additional, because that is the typically the security. We are covering the security in two levels. Validating the staging environment. After you choose an application, AWS recommends staging environment. This approach allows you to experiment with AWS WAF without negatively impact your production traffic, because you are going to block something, and if you block something, suddenly your application people will complain that I'm not able to access this, access that. So you need to replicate. This is very common now, because in IT we have SIT, UIT, production, or dev test, and production. So I skip this. So deploying to staging. So you should add the rules which is predefined requirement, or enable the rules which you want to enable, and try to test it out from the customer traffic. I'm not going to spend much time on it. So we understand we need to test it with pre-prod environment. Monitoring and visibility. So monitoring the boat traffic with the AWS boat control dashboard. So when, as I said, the boat will keep on sending the request. So if the same request is coming and then again, or if the request was going, so you have this dashboard to monitor the. If you see here, there's a spike here. You can see the spike. Why this spike is occur? Why this many request is coming from the boat? Then basically we need to do something. So how this monitoring has done, this is a dashboard part, but how the monitoring itself. So again, AWS, the only service which does monitoring is CloudWatch. So they have this CloudWatch rule, or CloudWatch, we need to add this WAF into CloudWatch, so it has some basic monitoring things which get monitored, and you can make different graphs, like geo filtering, allowed requests, what are requests, like no scan, SQL ingestion. There's no SQL ingestion now, like, so cookies. So these are the different parameters you can have it in CloudWatch to monitor it. View a sample of AWS log in AWS WAF console. You can see the sample, and randomly it fetch 5,000 requests if you want to see the sample. Enable and process WAF, because we won't have this DDoS attack or geo-specific attack, right? If you want to test it. So I have deployed in my pre-prod, and I want a request coming from Mumbai, for example, or Chennai, from example, right? And how I am not taking, because I am actually blocking that country or state because there is no users. So in that case, there we can use some sample things which AWS already have to use it, and enable the process and see it is working. So if it is not working, we should tune it. So after testing, we should see this false positive and false negatives. So false negatives is nothing but there is an it scans it and it finds the vulnerability, but it is not true. Like, it is not problem. We no need to work on it. So you can actually, this mostly we need to do regularly and find it out, this false negatives. Same way, there are some false positive as well. It says there's a request coming from Chennai, for example, but it may not be coming from Chennai exactly. It might be coming from near place, something like that. So we need to generally identify this false positive and act upon it, because it may not be true, but it may be, yeah. So it may be we need to do something with this, because it's that is where this false positive come to the picture. If you see 403 error, request could not be satisfied, request blocks, we cannot connect to the server if you provide. So this is the error message will go to the user, but that user, it's not, that region is not blocked, but the user gets it. So these are the false positive. It thinks that we should block him. So yeah, then resolving the false positive is very important, right? The false negatives is fine. We can ignore from our ends. False positive will impact our users. So after you understand the issue, you can resolve it, because if we understand why that particular user is complaining he not able to access, then we go and see the condition. If someone is change the condition, that can change. So what is the condition? Basically the rule, right? So block SSL condition and not the string matches the condition. So there is some string which based on that string it is blocking. So we need to remove that string, or we need to change our policies accordingly to allow the traffic. So these are some JSON rules which we need to apply, and we can also override the rules action. So if you select this, it can override the rule and it can serve the request for that user. So I think see, if you see here, there's a lot of rules which is block, block, block. This rule is allow false positive rule. There's a rule which we say override and allow the people to get it, and we can use labels so that it's very easy for us to understand the rules. If you are making the custom rules, right, then the label or the name of the rule itself will help you. So that is where it is telling about. And again, you can do everything with JSON and then deploy the JSON file. This is stored. This we can store it in AWS config, as we said. So once we've done all this, we need to deploy to the production. So how to deploy the setup, how to mitigate the false positive, how to troubleshoot the issues. This is very important, right? Because right now we are going to do it in production. So when it comes to deployment, we used to deploy. This is a AWS managed service. We need to just give some endpoints and no replace the rules. So this is not kind of you do lot of work because it's managed by AWS. You just need to add your CloudFront into this. We can also do a separate video with a demo if you like to see this WAF, but it's not much difficult. So they also recommend not recommend that the AWS WAF with other WAF offering evaluated because this results a conflict. So they say like you should not have there is many WAF offer is there, so you don't need to conflict with. If you are already using some of the third party, you can use it. So like there is a FortiGate or different thing, right? If you choose AWS firewall manager to deploy, then AWS recommend to start with the policy single endpoint first. So first you deploy to one application and then try for others. Post deployment, we need to monitor it. So the AWS suggest regular penetration test to ensure that you stay up to the latest threats to the address. So once we deploy it, just do the penetration testing. Like you try to um, do penetration testing. Most cases will be done by third-party companies, like they have hackers, so who try to test and see if these rules are working. No, because if we don't test it, then we may not know that rule is working or not. So that is why people try to do this penetration testing and they try to attack your system. And if system gets attacked, then we need to do something with the rules. So more or less, the final part is the cost consideration. So web firewall offers standalone pricing that is charged based on your usage of web ACL's rules and number of requests that are inspected. So that's very important. So it's a cost involved in it. For logging configuration, you will charge based on your usage in Kinesis. AWS port control request are paid. So since we are using multiple other services as well, that also will involve cost here. That can be added. If you choose to manage AWS rules in application file, you can subscribe to manage rules and pay only for your use. There is no contract or subscription commitments. So this you can use today and tomorrow. So it's based on usage. So that's very clear. But it's if you are security, if you're concerned, it's very good to have this as one of the cost because security is key, right? This white paper describes the threats that AWS WAF can address, the different requirements that you should consider for WAF, how to deploy it to production. So right now, for me, I am using like API gateway for my applications for my customers. So I am using WAF, so it really helps to block certain IP addresses, certain port numbers, and also giving audit logging. So that's why I felt to share this white paper with you guys, and I hope it will be really useful to all the people for security, also for security team. Thank you guys. Bye.